Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Hemant Sharma from MIT University, Gurgaon. Today we are going to talk on module Fundamentals of Decision Theory, Decision Making under Certainty, Uncertainty and Risk under the paper Quantitative Techniques for Management Decisions. Dear students, this is very important module, and after studying this module, you would be able to structure the decision problems, and this module will enable you to understand the various types of the decision making environments, like when decision is to be taken under certainty, decisions are taken under uncertainty, and when decisions are taken under risks. And third important aspect of this module is that it would be enabling you to understand different decision criterions which are used in uncertain conditions to select the best optimal strategy. So dear students, decision theory, it talks about the decision making. As all of us know that decision making is the most important phenomena in any business organization. Every manager, whether working at the top level or middle level, has to take decisions. And whenever we take any decision, we have usually two or more alternatives to choose from, and we always try to take the best decision. Decision theory provides an orderly way of choosing among several alternative strategies when decisions are made under either certainty or uncertainty or risk. The important thing about the decision is that decision is taken today and its outcomes would be visible after some time, after 1 month, 2 months, or even after a year or 2 years, or more number of the years. So a decision is good or a decision is bad, it is correct or it is false, wrong, it is visible or it is understandable only when its outcomes are visible. So here, while discussing the decision theory, first of all, we must know the meaning of the outcome, that is also termed as state of nature or an event. An outcome can be defined as the result of a particular alternative or course of action of the decision maker. Knowledge of outcome is very important when there are multiple courses of action in decision making process. It is very important in decision making to understand the three types of the environments prevailing, that are decision making under certainty, decision making under risk, and decision making under uncertainty. Decision making under certainty is applicable when decision maker is having complete knowledge of the various outcomes which are possibly to occur by taking a course of action. Decision making under risk, it can be signified by the knowledge of the various alternatives, various possible outcomes of each alternative, and more importantly, the decision maker is also able to assign a probability value with each and every possible outcome. And decision making is uncertainty when a alternative course of action may have multiple outcomes, multiple events, but the important thing is that decision maker has no knowledge of the probability that can be attached with each and every outcome. To give you more knowledge about the decision making under certainty, uncertainty or risk, I would like to give you one example of each. As in case of the decision under certainty, we know that decision maker is well aware of all possible outcomes and their values with certainty. So here the task of decision maker is very easy as far as finding out the optimum solution to any given problem is concerned. For an example, if the optimization criteria is the least cost and one person is considering two products, suppose LED and plasma TV, both appear to be similar in the value for the customer, and LED is costing 30% lesser than the plasma TV. Then, assuming all other things equal, a customer will obviously select the LED TV because of its lesser cost. So it is very simple case of the decision making, but it is at the same time very rare also, because it's almost impossible to have all other things being equal while comparing two or more number of the options or choices. And here I must tell you that as far as decisions under certain conditions are concerned, linear programming problem is the best way to give you the best optimal strategy under the known conditions. Now, decisions under risks, I have already told you, then when decision maker has full knowledge of outcomes and he is also in a position to assign a probability value to every possible outcome, and then it is a case of the decision making under risk. Under risks, decision maker, rather than optimizing the outcomes, he always tries to optimize the expected outcomes. So it can be explained to you better with the help of an example. Suppose there is a person and he is to decide between two strategies. Number one, he can go for the exclusive distribution of his products. He can go for the inclusive distribution of his product. So in case of the inclusive distribution, he can attach a 4% probability value of a gain of rupees 1 lakh. And in case of inclusive distribution, he is able to attach a probability value 38% in case of a gain of rupees 20,000. Now, being a rational decision maker, that person would obviously be going with the choice that is going to maximize his profits. So if we calculate the expected profits in both the cases, so it comes to be rupees 1 lakh multiplied by 0.4, so it is only 4,000, and in second case 20,000 multiplied by 0.38, so it comes to be 7,600. So second option, he must go for the inclusive distribution where there is a 30% probability of a gain of rupees 20,000. So this is a classic example of the decision making under risks. Decisions under uncertainty. This is the most typical situation for the decision maker, because he is not aware of the various possible outcomes and he cannot assign a probability value to different possible outcomes of any course of action or alternative. So here he is using different criterion to take a correct decision. Now in this module, our focus would be mainly on the decision making under uncertainty. We would be discussing the various criterion to be used by the decision maker to take an optimal decision. So now I am going to discuss with you the decision theory under uncertainty. So in this case, a complete process has to be adopted. Like at number 1, decision maker must identify all possible outcomes, or you can say events. Number 2, the decision maker must identify all possible strategies or course of actions in view of the possible outcomes. And at number 3, you can say he must be able to calculate the payoffs or rewards resulting from the different combinations of the outcomes and the course of actions, and then he must select from the various alternatives on the basis of the payoffs or some other criteria, and all courses of action must be exclusive and collectively exhaustive. So dear students, here we are going to discuss some criterion which are used to take a correct decision and optimal decision under the condition of the uncertainty. The main criterion which are used are Laplace decision criterion, Maximin or Minimax decision criterion, Maximax or minimum decision criterion, Hurwicz decision criterion, Savage decision criterion. So these all are mainly used in making an optimal decision when conditions are uncertain. So first, Laplace decision criterion is there. It is very simple decision criterion. It simply assumes that if we are not certain about the various outcomes, if we cannot assign the probability value to different possible outcomes, we are simply treating them as equally possible. In this case, we can calculate the expected mean value of payoff for every strategy, and we will simply consider the highest average payoff to select the optimal strategy. And if there is cost in consideration, then we will simply use the strategy that will make the average cost minimum possible. The second most commonly used criterion is Maximin decision criterion, and it is conservative in nature, and or you can say it is risk adverse criterion. Pessimistic decision makers are going with this type of the criterion who firmly believe that nature will vote against them. So in this criterion, the minimum payoff resulting from adoption of the various alternatives are considered, and among those the maximum one is considered. Thus it involves the best payoff from a set of worst payoffs. So similarly, Minimax decision criterion is there. When we are dealing with the costs in place of the payoffs or revenues or profits, if we are concerned with the costs, the equivalent conservative or risk adverse criterion would be the Minimax criterion. In this, what we do, again it is a pessimistic criterion. In this, what we do, maximum cost against every alternative is calculated, and then we select the least out of those maximum costs. So it is termed as Minimax decision criterion, again a pessimistic decision criterion. Dear students, the next decision criterion is Maximax decision criterion. So as the term signifies itself, Maximin, maximum out of maximum. So it is an optimist decision criterion, usually used only by the optimists, the decision makers who firmly believe that nature will work in support of them, in support of their decisions. And in this criterion suggests that first we need to calculate the maximum payoff against every alternative, and then we would be selecting the alternative with maximum payoff out of the maximums. So it is again a very good criteria, usually used by the optimists. And the corresponding decision criterion in case of the costs is the Min decision criteria. So in this, we need to calculate the minimum cost against every alternative course of action, and then we select the minimum out of the minimum costs. So again, this is an optimistic criteria used by the optimists. Dear students, the next decision criterion is Hurwicz principle, and it is very important one because it assumes that decision makers' view may fall somewhere between two extreme situations. A decision maker can be either extreme pessimistic or he can be extreme optimist. Now between these two extreme situations, his degree of optimism may lie somewhere on this scale between 0 and 1. 0 value refers to an extreme pessimistic situation, 1 refers to an extreme optimistic situation, and his level of optimism may lie somewhere between 0 and 1. So that level can be signified by a notion alpha, and value of alpha is between 0 and 1. So in this, first of all, we must have a value for the alpha, and after that we can calculate the maximum payoffs and the minimum payoffs for all possible alternatives, and then maximum payoffs are multiplied by the alpha and minimum payoffs are multiplied by 1 minus alpha, and then we can sum up both the products and we have a value corresponding to Hurwicz criterion, and the strategy with the highest value of Hurwicz criterion will be considered as the best strategy, the optimal strategy. So I will be explaining it in the next slides after some time. Now, next principle is the savage principle. Savage principle, it is based on the concept of the regret. Regret means opportunity loss. Opportunity loss means when decision maker has taken an alternative decision that is not as good as the best decision. So in that case, he would be suffering with some losses. So that is known as the opportunity loss. So I would be explaining it next in detail. So Savage principle suggests to select a strategy that is minimizing the maximum regret. So in this, first of all, we need to prepare a regret table from the given information, that is opportunity loss table, and then we will calculate the minimum regret for the every strategy, and then we would be selecting the strategy with the minimum regret. So again, it is a very good approach to select the optimal strategy. What we have learned so far about the decision making under uncertainty. Now I will like to explain all those things with the help of this example. Here you can see that a retailer sells bread for rupees 40. He purchases it for rupees 37 per packet. As demand for bread changes every day, the packets unsold at the end of day becomes useless and can be disposed of for rupees 30 per packet. According to previous experience, the daily demand for bread varies between 80 and 85 packets. Assuming that order is placed every night by the seller, and the problem before retailer is to decide how many packets should be ordered for the next day. So here you can see we have different alternatives like S1, S2, S3, S4, S5 and S6. These are the various possible course of actions taken by the retailer while placing the order for the bread for the next day. And we also have different outcomes like A1, A2, A3, A4, A5 and A6. These are the different possible outcomes, or we can say the actual demand of bread on that particular day. Now in this case, we can understand easily that we have 6 possible course of actions which are also known as alternatives. In view of 6 possible outcomes which are also known as events and state of nature. So here now we are to decide the best strategy, that means how many packets of bread must be ordered by the retailer so that his profits are the maximum. So dear students, as I told you that when we are to make decisions under uncertain conditions, so first we need to prepare a payoff table, or in some cases a regret table, that is also known as an opportunity loss table. So here we will learn how to prepare the payoff table with the help of the given example. So in this slide you can see that we have the different demands 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, which are the possible outcomes, and same time we have different alternatives A1, A2, A3, A4, A5 and A6. Alternative A1 means the retailer has given an order for 80 packets. Alternative A2 means retailer has placed an order for the 81 packets, and likewise. Now in this table we have calculated the profits of the retailer. For example, when demand is for 80 breads and retailer has taken alternative A1, that means he has placed an order for the 80 packets. In that case, his profits would be rupees 240. As we know from the example that the price per packet is rupees 40 and selling price is rupees 37. So obviously profit per packet is rupees 3. So when he is selling 80 packets, so his profits would be 80 into 3 equal to rupees 240. Similarly, for A4 strategy, you can see that he places an order for 83 bread and there is demand for only 80 packets. It means he is able to sell only 80 packets of breads. That will bring a profit of rupees 240, and 3 packets will remain unsold, which have to be disposed of, bearing a loss of rupees. You can see from the example that loss would be equal to rupees 30 per packet. So for strategy A4, we can see that total profits are equal to 80 into 3 is equal to rupees 240 minus 3 into 7, that is equal to 21. So net profit would be 219. So it's easy to understand from the given example that every unsold packet has to be disposed of for rupees 30 per packet, whereas the actual purchasing price of this packet is rupees 37. That's why every unsold packet of bread will bring a loss of rupees 7 per packet. So in this way we can find out the profits corresponding to the every alternative or course of action in view of the given outcomes. Similarly, we can also prepare the regret table, that is also known as an opportunity loss table for decision making. Regret table tells us about the loss of opportunities of not making the maximum profits. Actually, what happens sometimes the decision maker goes with an alternative that is not bringing the maximum profits or revenues for him. It means he has sacrificed some profits by adopting that particular course of action. So that is actually the loss of opportunity or the regret for the decision maker. So this regret table contains the losses associated with each alternative. In this slide you can see the way we have prepared the regret table or opportunity loss table. So again we have the different alternatives A1, A2, A3 up to A6 and various possible outcomes, that is demand for the bread equal to 80, 81, 82, 83 likewise. So for the demand 82 and alternative 82 we can see the loss is 0. Opportunity loss is 0. So it is obviously because of the fact that when the demand for the bread is 82 packets per day and the retailer has placed the order only for the 82 packets, it means he has sold all the packets on that particular day. He has no remaining packet of bread, so that's why the losses for the retailer are the 0. And similarly, we can see when demand is 82 and when retailer goes with alternative A4, that means he has placed an order for 83 packets. So here his loss is equal to rupees 7 because here he would not be able to sell one remaining packet of the bread, that will attract a loss of rupees 7. So here we can see as he moves from strategy A4 to A5 and A5 to A6, his losses also increase as the number of unsold packets also increase. So in this way, we can prepare the regret table for the given information, and there is also a very easy method to prepare the regret table. That is, first when we have prepared the payoff table from the given information, then we can identify the highest value in every column that is corresponding to the alternatives and subtract every item from the highest value, that will give you the regret or opportunity loss. So here we can see that when in payoff table for strategy A2 and when demand was 82, the corresponding value of the payoff is rupees 243. So 243 is the highest value of the payoff for alternative A2. So we can subtract every item of alternative A2 from the 243, that will give you the value of the regret or the opportunity loss. So it is a very good method to prepare the regret table or opportunity loss table. So dear students, now we will consider the first criterion which I have already discussed, Laplace decision criterion. So once we have prepared the payoff table from the given information, now we want to take an alternative or course of action that would be maximizing our payoffs, which are equivalent to our profits or revenues. In Laplace decision, we know that when we are not certain about the various outcomes, we may treat them equally probable. In this, we can calculate the expected mean value of payoff for each course of action, and the action with the highest mean payoff would be selected. If payoffs are in terms of costs, we obviously choose the action with the lowest average cost. So there we can prepare the cost table as explained later on. So in this slide we can see there are different possible outcomes, 80, 81, 82, 83, and various possible alternatives A1, A2, A3, A4. So in this table we have already calculated the payoffs for the various alternatives A1, A2, A3 up to A6 in view of the different possible outcomes. Like when demand is for 80 packets, and if we take action A1, its payoff would be 240. When demand is 80 and if we take action A2, its payoff would be 233. When demand is for 80 packets and we take action A3, its payoff would be 226 likewise. So after having prepared this payoff table, now we can calculate the average payoff for every alternative as shown in this table. For alternative A1, the average payoff is 240. For alternative A2, average payoff is 241.33. For alternative A3, the average payoff is 241, and likewise. For strategy A6, the average payoff is 230. So now, as per the Laplace decision criterion, we will go with the alternative that gives us the highest mean payoff. So here it's very easy to observe that the highest mean payoff, or we can say average payoff, is for strategy A2. That means retailer places an order for 81 packets. So in this case, we will obviously go with the course of action A2 because it is maximizing our mean payoff for the different possible outcomes. So I have already explained it that the best course of action would be A2 because for this mean payoffs are the maximum that are equal to the rupees 241.33. Now friends, we will discuss the next decision criteria, that is Maximin decision criterion. So I have already told you about it. The Maximin criterion is a very conservative or risk adverse criterion. Usually a decision maker with the pessimistic mind of set goes with this kind of the criterion because he assumes that nature will certainly vote against him. So in this, what we do actually, that minimum payoffs resulting from adoption of various alternatives are considered, and among those the maximum one is considered. Thus it involves the best payoffs from a set of worst payoffs. So it's easy to understand from the given slide that it is showing the payoffs for all possible alternatives in view of all possible outcomes. Now here what we observe, that first we have calculated the minimum payoff for every alternative, that is for strategy A1 is equal to rupees 240. For strategy A2, the minimum payoffs are rupees 233. For strategy A3, minimum payoffs are rupees 226. For strategy A4, minimum payoffs are rupees 219. For strategy A5, rupees 212. And lastly, for strategy A6, minimum payoffs are rupees 205. So once we have calculated the minimum payoff for all the possible alternatives, now we will select the minimum payoff, maximum out of the minimum. So here we can see that the maximum payoff is rupees 240, and it is for the strategy A1. So it is Maximin decision criterion that is suggesting to select the alternative that gives you maximum payoff out of the minimum. So it is good criteria, but most of times used by the pessimistic decision makers. Now the third criteria of choosing the best course of action is Minimax decision criterion. Dear students, I have already explained then that when we are dealing with the costs, the equivalent conservative or risk adverse criterion would be the Minimax criterion. It is again a pessimistic criterion. In this, maximum costs against every alternative is considered, and the strategy with the least cost is finally considered. So it is a good criteria, but mostly used by the pessimistic decision makers. So in this table, we can see that we are given with the costs for different alternatives in view of the different possible outcomes. Here, please keep in mind that you are given with the costs of different alternatives in view of the different outcomes. These are not the payoffs. So now we will consider this table as a cost table for the various alternatives. So here what we will do, first of all, we will calculate the maximum cost for every alternative in view of the different outcomes. So you can notice here that for strategy A1, the maximum cost is 240. For A2, it is 243. For strategy A3, it is 246. For strategy A4, it is 249. And for strategy A5, it is 252. And finally, for strategy A6, the highest cost is the 255. Now, as per the Minimax criteria, we will select the minimum cost out of the maximum. So in this case, you can see that 240 is the minimum value of the cost out of the maximum costs, and it occurs for the action A1. So as per the Minimax decision criterion, we will select alternative A1 because it is minimizing the cost out of the maximum. It is reasonably good criteria, but usually adopted by the pessimistic decision makers. So students, the next criteria to select the best alternative is the Maximin principle. It is a good principle or good criterion to select the best alternative or strategy from the given so many. It is actually an optimist principle of choice. It is a risk-seeking criterion, and it advocates that maximum profit for each strategy must be considered and the strategy with highest profit must be selected. This is usually adopted by the decision makers who are having a positive mind, an optimistic mind, and who firmly believe that the nature will do a favor for him in future. And this strategy suggests that we must select the highest profit from the highest one. We can see that we are given with the payoffs for the different alternatives, and with the help of the given payoffs, we can calculate the maximum payoff for every alternative or the strategy. For example, strategy A1 brings highest payoff equal to rupees 240. For strategy A2, highest payoff are equal to 243, and finally for strategy A6, final payoffs are rupees 255. So once we have calculated the highest payoffs for every course of action, now we can easily select the maximum of them. So in this case, 255 is the highest payoff out of the maximum payoffs of different course of actions. So we will obviously go with the strategy A6, that is equivalent to placing an order for 85 packets of the bread so that we can maximize our profits. So again, it is an optimist criterion and it can be used suitably in our decision making if we are willing to maximize our payoffs. So dear students, the next criterion to select the best alternative or course of action that I am going to discuss is the Minimin decision criterion. It is very good criterion and adopted largely by the decision makers. If the values in the payoff matrix were costs, the equivalent optimist criterion is min-min. It means when we are given with the costs, then obviously our purpose is to minimize the costs, and for that min-min decision criterion is the best suitable criteria. It assumes that nature will vote for me, and in this minimum costs for all alternatives can be computed, and then the strategy for which the cost is the least is finally selected. So in this table you can see that instead of the payoffs, now you can consider all these figures as the costs for the different alternatives. Like for example, for strategy A1, and when demand is 80 packets, the cost is rupees 240. For strategy A2, cost is rupees 233. For strategy A3, cost is rupees 226, and so on. So instead of considering these numbers as the payoffs, you can take these numbers as the costs of the different course of actions. So as per the Min-min decision criterion, here we have selected the minimum cost for every possible alternative. So for strategy A1, the minimum cost is rupees 240. For strategy A2, it is 233. For strategy A3, it is 226. For strategy A4, it is 219. And for strategy A6, it is 205. So once we have calculated the minimum cost for every strategy, now we can easily select the least cost, that is 205 in this case, and it occurs corresponding to A6 strategy. So as per the Min-min decision criterion, I will go with the strategy A6. So I have already discussed it that strategy A6 is the best suitable as per the Min-min criterion, because for this cost is the minimum, that is equal to 205. The next principle which I am going to discuss is the Hurwicz principle. Dear students, as I have already explained, that Hurwicz principle assumes that a decision maker's view may fall somewhere between two extreme situations, extreme pessimism and extreme optimism. This principle provides a mechanism, or we can say a kind of scale ranging from 0 to 1, and this scale measures different levels of the optimism and pessimism of any decision maker. The 0 shows the extreme pessimism and 1 refers to extreme optimism. Decision maker's level of optimism, that is usually signified by alpha, it can be reflected by assigning a value between 0 and 1. Alpha represents degree of optimism and 1 minus alpha would represent degree of pessimism. Now we will see how to prepare the payoff table for the Hurwicz principle. So in this slide you can see that we prepare the table comprising of the maximum and minimum payoff for each alternative. So in the first column you can see that we have shown the maximum payoffs, and in the second column we have shown the minimum payoffs for the alternatives. And for each alternative, maximum payoff is multiplied by alpha and minimum payoff is multiplied by 1 minus alpha, and then the sum of both product is known as the Hurwicz criterion. The strategy for which the value of Hurwicz criterion is the maximum is finally selected. So dear students, here we can easily understand that when alpha is equal to 0, that will reflect an extreme pessimism situation and corresponding to Minimin decision criterion. And when alpha is equal to 1, it would reflect extreme optimism situation, and it is very much corresponding to the Maximin decision criterion. So in this slide, or I can say in this example, I have considered the value of alpha equal to 0.3. So obviously 1 minus alpha would be equal to 0.7. Now maximum payoffs corresponding to every outcome is multiplied by 0.3 and minimum payoffs are multiplied by 0.7. So in this way I can do the calculation for all maximum and minimum payoffs, and the outcome for which the value of Hurwicz criterion comes to maximum, obviously we will go with that alternative. So in that case we can easily observe that for alternative A1 the value of Hurwicz criterion is equal to 240, that is maximum out of all values, and therefore according to Hurwicz principle strategy A1 is the best one. This principle can also be used when we are given with the costs. So in case of costs, obviously we will follow a reverse process. Instead of preparing a payoff table, we will prepare a cost table, and maximum and minimum cost for every alternative is considered. For every alternative, maximum cost is multiplied by 1 minus alpha and minimum cost is multiplied by the alpha. So here the process is just opposite. You can note it down. And finally, the sum of both products is known as the Hurwicz criterion, and the strategy for which the value of Hurwicz criterion is the minimum, it is finally selected. So this principle is based on the concept of regret, that is also known as opportunity loss. It suggests to select a strategy that minimizes the maximum regret or loss. In this, first we need to prepare a regret table, and then maximum regret for each alternative is considered. Then the strategy having the minimum value out of these maximum values is finally selected. So in this slide we can see that we have prepared the opportunity loss or regrets for every alternatives in view of the different possible outcomes, and then we have calculated the maximum regrets corresponding to the every strategy. For strategy A1, maximum regret is 15. For strategy A2, it is 12. For strategy A3, it is 14. And for strategy A4, it is 21. And finally, for strategy A6, it is 35. So once we have calculated the maximum regrets for all possible alternatives, now we will select the minimum out of these. So it is clear that minimum value of regret is the 12, and it occurs corresponding to strategy A2. So for strategy A2, regret value is 12 and that is the minimum. That's why this is the best strategy according to Savage principle, and we will adopt this strategy. So dear students, in nut and shell, I can say that this is very important module that has discussed the various types of the criterion to be used by the decision makers in case of the uncertainty, because it's a really great challenge for the decision makers, as he is knowing nothing about the probability of occurrence of different possible outcomes. So these criterion become very important, like Laplace, Minimax, Maximin, Savage and Hurwicz criterion. All are very important criterion which can be used by the decision makers in case of absence of any knowledge pertaining to the probability of occurrence of any outcome as by taking alternative course of actions or the strategies. Sometimes decisions makers need to prepare a regret table along with the payoff table to take the optimal decisions. So we can do that easily as the case may be. However, the conclusions are the same in both the cases. Thank you.